I was 27 years old the first time someone called me cheap. Funny enough, I can still remember exactly where we were sitting. It wasn't because the food was unforgettable. It wasn't because something dramatic happened. It was because, looking back, that ordinary dinner quietly changed the rest of my life. There were 6 of us. We'd just been paid the day before. Back then, payday felt like permission. Permission to celebrate. Permission to spend. Permission to convince ourselves we were finally getting somewhere. We talked about promotions, vacations, new cars, expensive watches, and all the things we promised ourselves we'd buy once we made enough money. Looking back, none of us realized that making more money doesn't automatically make you wealthier. Then the bill arrived. Someone suggested dessert, another bottle of wine. Everyone agreed. Everyone, except me. I quietly looked down at my share, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I already knew what I wanted that money to become. I smiled, paid for my meal, stood up, and said, "I'm heading home." That's when someone laughed. "Come on, Greg. Don't be so cheap." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But that drive home was one of the quietest drives of my life. At the time, I thought they were laughing at my money. Years later, I realized they had accidentally introduced me to the most expensive habit in the world: the need to impress people. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about those 2 words. You're cheap. I had no idea that a conversation over coffee later that day would completely change the way I thought about money forever. I wish I could tell you those words didn't bother me. But they did, more than I wanted to admit. The next morning, I looked at myself differently. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too careful. Maybe life was passing me by while I was busy saying no. Have you ever wondered if you're the problem? I certainly did. That drive to work felt different. Every car suddenly looked newer than mine. Every person looked more successful. Funny how your mind starts collecting evidence once it believes a story. Mine had decided that I wasn't enough. By lunchtime, I had almost convinced myself to upgrade my life. A nicer car, better clothes, maybe a more expensive watch. Not because I needed them, because I wanted to feel accepted. Looking back, that's one of the most expensive emotions a person can have. That's when something unexpected happened. I stopped for coffee. Just a normal Tuesday. Just a normal cafe. And I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. His name was Mr. Thompson. He was one of the quietest people I'd ever met. But every time he spoke, people listened. We talked for a while, mostly about work, life, nothing unusual. Then he looked out the cafe window, smiled, and asked me one question. A question that quietly changed the direction of my life. "Greg, who are you trying to impress?" I didn't answer, because I couldn't. The truth was, I didn't even know. And sometimes, the questions that change your life are the ones that leave you speechless. That question followed me everywhere. Driving home, standing in line at the grocery store, even lying awake at night. Who was I really trying to impress? The answer led me to a simple habit that quietly changed everything. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Thompson's question. Who are you trying to impress? It followed me everywhere. At the grocery store, at work, even while scrolling through magazines during my lunch break. And then, one afternoon, I caught myself doing something I'd never noticed before. I wasn't shopping because I needed something. I was shopping because I wanted to feel like someone. That day, I made a promise to myself. I would never buy anything important the same day I wanted it. I would wait. Just one night. If I still wanted it tomorrow, I'd think about buying it. I call it the sunrise rule. Something surprising happened. The next morning, I didn't even want the shoes anymore. Then it happened again and again. I started realizing something. I wasn't resisting purchases. I was giving my emotions time to calm down. Most impulse buys don't survive a good night's sleep. That's when I discovered another question. A question that has saved me far more money than any budget ever could. Before buying anything, I simply asked myself, would I still buy this if nobody else ever knew I owned it? It sounds simple, but that question changed everything. Most of the time, the answer was no. I didn't want the watch. I wanted the reaction. I didn't want the expensive car. I wanted the admiration. I didn't want the designer jacket. I wanted approval. And approval is one of the most expensive things you'll ever try to buy. Little by little, those small decisions became habits, and those habits quietly became investments. I still didn't know it then, but every dollar I chose not to spend was beginning to buy something much bigger than things. It was buying freedom. Of course, changing one habit doesn't change your life overnight. There were still moments when I wanted to keep up with everyone else. There were still days I questioned myself. But then something happened a few years later. I attended another dinner with many of the same friends. This time, everything felt different. A few years passed. Life moved on. The funny thing about discipline is that it rarely feels rewarding in the beginning. Most days looked completely ordinary. I still drove the same old Corolla, still packed my lunch, still made coffee at home. From the outside, it probably looked like nothing had changed. But something was changing. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Every month, a little more money stayed with me. Every month, a little more money started working for me. Nobody congratulated me. Nobody noticed. And that's exactly how wealth usually grows. Then, one Friday evening, something unexpected happened. The same group of friends invited me to dinner again. Different restaurant, same people. As I walked in, I realized something. Nobody had changed, except me. The conversations hadn't changed much. New trucks, bigger mortgages, credit card rewards, vacations they were still paying off. I wasn't judging them. I saw myself in them. Because just a few years earlier, I wanted exactly the same things. That's when one of them looked at me and laughed. "Greg, you're still driving that old Corolla?" Everyone smiled. This time, I smiled too. But it felt different. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. Because for the first time, I understood something they couldn't see. They saw an old car. I saw another year of financial freedom. They saw something I hadn't upgraded. I saw something I no longer needed to prove. That was the night I finally realized wealth isn't about looking successful. It's about needing less applause. Looking back, I never became wealthy because I was smarter than everyone else. I became wealthy because I slowly stopped buying things to impress people who were too busy trying to impress someone else. And if I could sit across the table from my 27-year-old self today, there are 5 things I'd tell him. You know, people sometimes ask me, "Greg, what's the secret?" They expect me to talk about investments, stocks, real estate, compound interest. And don't get me wrong, those things matter. But they weren't where my journey began. My financial freedom didn't begin with a great investment. It began the day I stopped trying to buy other people's approval. Looking back, That was the highest return investment I ever made. If I could sit across the table from that 27-year-old version of myself, I'd tell him 5 things. First, never make an important purchase on an emotional day. Excitement fades, stress fades, anger fades. Good decisions usually survive until tomorrow. Second, before buying anything, ask yourself one question. Would I still buy this if nobody else ever knew I owned it? That single question has saved me thousands of dollars and countless regrets. Third, pay your future self before you reward your present self, even if it's just a small amount. Consistency will always outperform intensity. Fourth, create a guilt-free sanity fund. Enjoy your money. Buy yourself a nice meal. Go on that day trip. Treat someone you love. Financial freedom isn't about never spending. It's about spending with intention instead of impulse. And finally, stop comparing your beginning to someone else's highlight reel. The people who look wealthy aren't always financially free. And the people quietly building wealth rarely feel the need to announce it. Build a life, not an image. Before you leave today, I'd like you to try something. I call it the Greg Notebook. Tonight, before you go to bed, write down one thing you've been tempted to buy this week. Then ask yourself, would I still want this if nobody else ever knew I owned it? You don't have to answer me. Just answer yourself. You know, they called me cheap all those years ago. Looking back, maybe they were right. I was cheap with approval, cheap with ego, but never with my future. And that's why my future became priceless. I'll see you in the next story. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to change your financial future, then you're exactly where you belong. Every week, we'll share another true-to-life story about money, discipline, and the quiet habits that lead to financial freedom. So grab a cup of coffee, subscribe to Greg Moneywise, and I'll meet you here for the next story.